Are we predestined, or do we have free will? Is our every move in life scripted in advance, or do we exercise the ability to choose? Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, August 16th, 2022. This week I'm talking about some of the paradoxes and polarities we encounter in the Christian faith. In my experience, there is no other polarity more misunderstood than the relationship between predestination and free will. Let me begin by saying that most everything you know or think you know about predestination is probably wrong. Now, I don't mean that as an insult, but rather as a way to say that what most people mean when they use the word predestination is really what we call predeterminism. Predeterminism is the idea that whatever we do in life is at least in some measure determined ahead of time by someone or something else. And it doesn't have to be God who determines things. It can be our genetic makeup, our place in the world, where we're born, what kind of family we happen to be born into, what zodiac sign we were born under, or any of several other forces that may or may not be at work. Philosophers debate this all the time. It's certainly not limited to discussions of predestination, but predestination is simply not about predeterminism. Very little in this ancient Christian doctrine has to do with what we do day in and day out. Predestination has to do with our, ultimate destination, salvation or damnation, rather than most anything we happen to do in life. So when someone says they were predestined, for example, to be in church on a particular Sunday, they're using the term incorrectly. And that's where the predestination versus free will debate goes off the rails. You probably know that we Presbyterians are closely identified with the doctrine of predestination, and with good reason. John Calvin made it an important part of his theology, which is carried on through today. But Calvin himself did not invent the doctrine. No, it was first articulated some 1100 years before Calvin by the Catholic theologian we know as St. Augustine of Hippo in North Africa. Over a period of years, Augustine's understanding of predestination grew and developed, but it was in an ongoing argument with another theologian named Pelagius, a British monk active in the years before and after the year 400 AD, that the doctrine really took hold. See, Pelagius held that we have a role to play in our own salvation through good works, that God will reward the virtuous and punish the wicked for their actions in life. Augustine wisely understood that from a pastoral perspective, this is a devastating idea. Because if our salvation depends on our actions, then we enter into a world of fear and anxiety. We would be afraid each day that we had either done something that would exclude us from heaven or failed to do something with the same result. That fear would lead to a life of constant anxiety as we worried about our ultimate destiny. So for Augustine, predestination wasn't just a biblical doctrine, which it is, by the way. It was also a pastoral doctrine. If instead of worrying about whether our actions will disqualify us from heaven, we could learn to rely on the grace of God in our lives, our lives would be immeasurably better. But it's not just about relieving our anxiety. Augustine also knew that if we are constantly worried about our salvation, then we become profoundly, radically self-centered, because we become focused on ourselves and whether or not we are saved. By contrast, a life lived by grace is a life that's free to focus on other people and other things. More than that, when we become aware of God's grace, we tend to become grateful for that grace. In this understanding of predestination, there is wide open space for individual free will. We are free to do all kinds of things, and we are free to make mistakes, knowing that our mistakes do not condemn us to eternal damnation. The one thing we are not free to do is choose whether to be saved. That's the one and only thing. In this regard, the tension between predestination and free will turns out to be a false dichotomy. Predestination and free will coexist easily and comfortably. But here's the thing. Even those who believe predestination works against our free will bump up against another hard truth, and that is, on our own we are simply incapable of doing what it would take to earn our salvation. In this instance, our free will is even more constrained. So I guess it comes down to this. Would we rather live a life of constant fear and anxiety, trapped in a self-absorbed life of worry about our salvation? Or would we prefer to live a life of joyful gratitude to God, knowing that God alone has granted us the salvation we so desperately desire? For me, the choice is simple. I prefer a life free from the burden of fear and anxiety. Tomorrow, providence versus raw chance. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.